This meeting is being recorded.
Ooh, that was very loud. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dennis Waters. I'm the Executive Director of Benefits for GIOA, and today is part 2 of our FMLA and other leave training that we are going over. We are really excited to be hosting this series for you all as it is a super important part of your everyday lives as leaders, as owners, as HR staff, and admins to your facilities. Today, we do have Cindy Moultrie and Maddie Mordenti again with us, and they will help field any questions that you have through the Q&A feature at the bottom. We are recording the session, and we will distribute it to everyone post-call. So let's start with a little bit of recap of what we talked about last week. So first, the things that we're focusing on in this training are ADA, FMLA, PWFA, and USERA. So these are specifically around leaves and accommodations that are required on a federal level. I did mention last week that there are some local leaves and some state leaves that you may want to be aware of and be accountable for in your different areas and jurisdictions. We can certainly send a chart out of what those could look like, but we're focusing mainly on the primary ones here in this space. So look for future trainings on anything specific to your region, but for the purposes of our trainings, these 3 sessions is specific to the federal regulations. So the first thing we talked about last week, just as a recap, is who is responsible for leave monitoring? Who is responsible for making sure that you are offering coverages, that you are tracking how much is being used, and things of that nature? And the answer to that question is the employer. So you as the franchisee owner, or if you are in the role of an admin or HR support staff that's doing this on behalf of the operator, you are responsible for the actual tracking and the approvals of the leaves, the tracking of the leaves, the tracking of the hours, when somebody applies for specific leave, and doing the accommodation approval. So that lies within the realm of the actual staff at hand. The next thing we covered last week was who was responsible for notification of the rights. So telling a team member that they have FMLA rights or USERA rights, or just knowing that there are rights that are existing. And again, that is anyone who has team members reporting to them. So even if you're not the owner, even if you're not the franchisee, if you're not the admin or the HR staff member, but you have team members that report to you. So you are a shift lead and somebody's reporting to you and you see that they're always out or they're always coming in late and it's something to do with a headache or a mother or a child, then you are part of that responsibility arm to say, here are your FMLA rights, right? And so anyone who has that kind of role is sitting in a seat of leadership there, is responsible for helping to notify team members of their rights. What is considered a leave? FMLA and USERA, those are the 2 actual leaves that are deemed actual leaves of absences. They're not accommodations, they're actual leaves. They are in the leave category. Both are unpaid by you as the employer. There's no payment there. And remember that, that's super important. They're unpaid leaves. But they can run concurrent with a short-term disability. They can run concurrent with under USERA. They're getting some kind of military pay. But from you as the employer is an unpaid leave of absence. So then what's an accommodation? And we talked about that being ADA and PWFA. So sometimes those can manifest as I need a lump of time. Sometimes it just could be I need an accommodation on my job, right? So maybe I can only stand up for 2 hours at a time. So the accommodation is to give me extra breaks or to give me a stool. It could be I can't do this. Maybe I roll some silverware or whatever the situation is. Those are accommodations for those specific 2 things that we did talk about last time, the American Disabilities Act and then the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act. So pregnant workers and workers with a disability. Now with the ADA, just want to remind everybody that particular one that you cannot offer that accommodation. If you see it, it's supposed to be requested. You're not supposed to say, hey, I see you, do you need this? But the PWFA, certainly you can do that for your pregnant workers. Just want to make sure you're aware of all the rules there. Again, do you have to offer these to your employees as a franchisee? So we had that question actually pop up quite a bit in our Q&A last time, and the answer to that question is yes. And the criteria is not about a full-time equivalent or a full-time team member. It's about who you have in your store as a general head count. So for ADA and PWFA, that's 15 plus team members. For FMLA is 50 plus team members, and USERA, you have to do it no matter how many team members you have. Now, one quick amendment to USERA, I believe there was a question last time that asked, does it cover FEMA workers? And I said no, and the update to that is it was amended to cover FEMA workers. And so if you have employees who are FEMA, they also are covered under USERA. So just want to make sure you have this in mind. So with these number counts, you can see most operators are going to fall into ADA, PWFA, and FMLA, and everybody is USERA. So really, this is important to everybody who is in our organization at GIOA. All right. So before I go on to just recap some of the eligibility requirements, because this is where we stopped last time, do we have any questions in the Q&A about what we covered last time, or do we need anything clarified from last time?
Yes, hi Glennis.
Yes, hi, Glennis.
I have a question regarding what is the employer's responsibility as far as letting the employee know about their rights? If they have posters in the restaurant about this, does that suffice? Is that good enough?
We did send out a infographic that you could put up in your restaurant. That is not enough. If you see a team member, you really should give that person um, their rights under FMLA if you see as a condition that's qualifying. I'm stressing FMLA, right, because for you, Sarah, if a team member says I'm getting called to duty, you can't request paperwork. You just kind of have to let them go. So there's no notification of rights there. They're notifying you. But for FMLA, for that particular one, you do want to make sure if you're seeing that need, if that person is always talking about migraines or late from a doctor's appointment, that you do give them those rights. So then then the onus becomes on them if they actually file for that leave of absence. So just keep in mind you do need to give it to them even if it's posted in the restaurant at
Thank
the
you.
time
Can you
of the
also
need.
clarify who determines their eligibility and whether they qualify for it?
Right.
Okay, and that's where we are right now. So you as the employer, you as the HR person, not let me back up. Whoever is the leave administrator for your facility. So if that leave administrator for your facility happens to be the franchisee or is the HR person, there should be one dedicated person or two, depending on what your need is, but one should be sufficient, who is approving the leave at your facility. This is something that is done at the store by whoever the operator designates is your leave person or your HR person. So that person, when the team member is given the rights by whoever, anybody in a leadership role can give the rights, right? But you should not be making a determination on the approval unless you are the person who is supposed to do that. So that particular person who is assigned should be making that determination. If you do not have someone in your organization assigned as the designated person, you probably need to determine who that will be because they will be getting medical certification information, and that should not be something shared throughout everyone. We've all taken HIPAA training, and you should not be keeping people's information out in the open or just, having everybody accessible to it. So I suggest there should be one designated person for that, Cindy, in the store.
Thank you, Glennis.
Thank you, Glennis.
Okay. All right. So while we're talking about approvals, and this is where we kind of left off last time, for USERA, again, they're members of the reserves, the National Guard, FEMA. That's their eligibility requirement. They're participating in that, they're eligible. For PWFA, they're pregnant workers, they're eligible. For disability, they have a disability situation, they can apply, they're eligible. So there's not really a count for that as far as how long somebody's working for you to be eligible for those accommodations or that USERRA leave, but there is for your FMLA. And so for the FMLA, it is very prescriptive. And we got to this a little bit, we didn't get to it in great detail, but the person has to work for you 12 months. So that is not on a calendar year. It is 12 months from the point where they are requesting the leave of absence. That's the first criteria they have to meet. So if somebody applies for leave, so they get their leave paperwork, or they come and say, I need to apply for leave, and you give them the paperwork and they fill it out. When you assess them as that person in that role, if they've only been working for you for 11 months, that automatically disqualifies them for FMLA. But if they meet that first marker of 12 months from the date of leave, so today is February 20th. If my 1 year is March 1st and I'm asking for leave as of March 1st, I have satisfied that 12-month provision, even though I'm applying for leave today on February 20th. So you do have to be mindful of those dates. The second criteria is that they have worked at least 1,250 hours. So this is not 1,249 and a half. It is not 1,248. It is 1,250 hours, which is less than full-time hours, by the way, in that 12-month period. So as of, in our example we just used, as of March 1st, will I have worked, or will I have worked 1,250 hours? So if I apply for leave today on February 20th and that number is 1,000, okay, by March 1st, I'm not going to make 1,250 hours. That's like almost impossible, right? So I don't meet that criteria. But if I'm at 1,240 on February 20th, it is possible by March 1st, I will have 1,250 hours. So you cannot deny that leave until you can confirm that these hours will be met, which if you are the HR person, you should be able to see that with the scheduling, or you could go to the scheduler and see what that person will be scheduled to work. And again, that is for leaves that people are telling you in advance. Certainly, the numbers will be whatever the numbers are. If somebody's out, like they get hit by a car or they go in a coma or something like that, and they're going out immediately, then you would know those numbers up front. But just know it is 1,250 hours or more, right? So it's not 48, 49 and a half, 49.75. They have to hit 1,250 hours. Be very prescriptive with that, because if you go below that number because it's close, then you need to maintain that for everybody else. And as we said on the last call, this is about being compliant. So sticking to that number is going to be what's best for you. Okay. Now, when you're counting that period of eligibility, if there's a break in service, that still counts as a year as long as it hasn't been over 7, right? So like if I left and I was gone for 2 months and I came back, that's still in that 1 year of employment. So just be careful as you're counting that you're like, oh, well, they were just rehired. They were gone for 3 months and they got rehired, so they haven't been here a year. The period of break is 7. So if the break has been less than that, then they've been working for you and that 1 year requirement is met. So just kind of keep that in mind as you are going through the approval process for your leave. I'm going to pause there for a moment. Do we have any questions on the initial approval? So that process we just talked about was qualifying them to actually turn in medical information so you can approve the broader leave of the length of time. That is not approving what they're requesting from their doctors. That is just qualifying them for the FMLA leave. Are there any
Glennis,
questions?
I don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay, perfect. All right, so If they meet all those criteria, they worked for you a year, 1,250 hours. Again, remember, it does not matter if they're full-time. It does not matter if they're part-time, okay? It does not matter. As long as they meet those criteria. Then here on the screen are the qualifying reasons for FMLA, all right? So if they have a child, they have birth of a child, or care for a newborn. So this covers men and women, right? So if a husband and a wife both work for you and they're having a baby, they both can take FMLA. Now, the rules say that they both can take it, but if they both work for you, then they have to share the 12-week period. So they don't get 12 and 12 individually, it's a combined time, right? So in that case, the husband would get it for care of his wife and care of the newborn, and the wife will get it for care of herself from birth and care of the newborn. There's a baby bonding period that's in there. That's what the care of a newborn is. So birth does qualify. Also, adoption and foster care, if a child gets placed, that does qualify for FMLA as well. To care for your spouse or your parent. Now, we did indicate in the last call, just to clarify, a child is a child 18 or younger, or if they're over 18, they have to be disabled and unable to do 3 daily acts of living, right? So they'll be dressing themselves, bathing themselves, feeding themselves, or something along those lines. But 3 out of the 5 they cannot perform. And it does not cover your in-laws. However, if you are adopted and you have a surrogate parent, it does cover that for yourself, for your parent. But it does not cover your grandparents. It does not cover your spouse's parents. It only covers your parents, your children under 18, unless they are unable to perform 3 functions of daily living, and your spouse and yourself. Now, when you get this request, there are 2 forms. There are 2 separate forms that your team members fill out for FMLA. So you have to know which one to give them. So as you're looking at these qualifying reasons, remember, if they say, I am having surgery, I am sick, I am having a baby, they get the form that says FMLA for employee. That is the form for themselves, okay? For themselves. If they are saying, my spouse is having surgery, my spouse is having a baby, I need to take care of them, my child, is out, they broke a leg and they're out for whatever period of time, then there's a form that says FMLA for care for a family member. So there are 2 different forms that the team member would need to fill out depending on what the indication is for. So you don't want to give them a family member form if they're applying for themselves. And that is because the one for the employee is saying, I cannot perform my job. The one where they're covering their child is saying, I need to be out, absent, away to take care of another person. So that's why there's 2 sets of forms. Are there any questions in the Q&A about that?
Glennis, can you go over one more time about a newborn and both parents receiving leave? I have one question on that.
Yes, absolutely. So if you have a husband and wife that both work for you in the same location, like they work for you, and they're both going out, they have to share. There's a rule that says they have to share the time for FMLA. So she doesn't get 12 weeks and then he gets another 12 weeks. It's a shared period of leave for that birth only, that they do have to share the time together. So it's not 24 weeks, it's just one set of 12.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on that? Okay. So we talked a little bit about birth. Let's just go a little bit deeper into that. So with the birth, again, we talked about being the mother and father and bonding. So birth, right? Pregnancy, if somebody goes out early, let's say they get on bed rest, that will count towards their 12 weeks of FMLA. Remember, it is one 12-week window. It is not 12 weeks per different type of sickness. So just kind of keep that in mind. If they go on bed rest early, it does reduce their FMLA time. So you may have to approve FMLA for the first period for bed rest and then approve FMLA for birth. So there could be different levels of FMLA as you're reviewing the leaves of what is there. I think what's super important about this particular piece is that for the bonding part, right? So for baby bonding, they do not have to take baby bonding consecutive. So if let's say I have a baby, I had a vaginal, my doctor says, 6 weeks for my vaginal, and then I get 4 weeks of baby bonding time. I could take my 6 weeks for vaginal delivery continuous, and then I can decide, oh, I only want to do 2 weeks of baby bonding continuous, and then I want to take the other 2 weeks at a later date. That is allowed under FMLA. They do not have to take all their baby bonding at one time. They can do it intermittently, they can do it continuously, and they can take it at different periods in the year, as long as they take it within the first year that the baby is born from the birth. So they have 12 months to take the baby bonding. Most parents don't do that. Most take the baby bonding immediately. But in the event that you have somebody who's like, I need to come back to work, and they want to, take some time off of the baby later, just remember their baby bonding does not have to be continuous. That time for baby bonding can be intermittent, okay? As long as it's done within 1 year of the birth. That was a lot. Are there questions about that? Okay. For adoption and foster care, that same rule applies, that they don't have to take the 12 weeks all at one time. They can spread it out. Because adoption, they may have to travel, they may have to go to different things. And so that lump sum of time of 12 weeks can be spread out over a 12-month period as the person is going through the adoption process. So if you get somebody who's adopting a child and they apply for FMLA, just keep in mind that that can be an intermittent time. And so it can be, as long as it's 12 months over the whole time of the adoption period. So that does not have to be a straight 12-week window. All right. Now, when they're qualifying for themselves, and it's a serious condition. So we're not talking about pregnancy now. We're talking about somebody who's not pregnant. As you can see, they qualify for FMLA for various things, and there's rules, right? So a serious health condition, that could be, I have cancer, I got hit by a car, I'm in a coma, I had some undiagnosed something, I had a heart attack, stroke, kidney failure. Anything I need some treatments I didn't know about, I got, diagnosed and I had to go out, where it's taking them out for more than 3 days. Okay. So that's the key. It takes them out for more than 3 days initially. So again, Susie calls in, she doesn't come for 3 days. You can't do a no call, no show term for Susie, right? You probably need to give Susie her FMLA rights and say, hey, Susie, you're not at work. Here are your FMLA rights. If you're not feeling good, please apply for leave. And then that way you have done your obligation as an employer, and then Susie has to file for her leave time. Keep in mind, you should probably have some rules in place if Susie is incapacitated that somebody can apply for leave on her behalf, whether it's a parent or a sibling or you yourself as an HR person, where you can initiate leave on Susie's behalf if she's incapacitated. That can happen if they're in a hospital and they can't file their FMLA paperwork. Now, one thing you'll notice down here is about chronic conditions. This is where the intermittent time comes in, where they don't need 12 weeks straight, but I have a migraine. So, I may need to be out twice a week for migraines, or I believe there was an example about heat, right? Heat indexes. And so this is where the intermittent will come in for chronic conditions, and that requires medical as well for a chronic condition. I see a question in the Q&A, Cindy. Is it pertaining to this session? Do we need to stop and pause?
It is actually pertaining to FMLA due to pregnancy again.
Yes.
If a team member has a difficult pregnancy and starts FMLA about 6 weeks early, but needs 8 weeks to recover, that's obviously more than 12 weeks. What should the operator do in that case, or what are their options?
Well, there's a couple of things. You do have PWFA if there's an accommodation, right? So they don't have to drain their FMLA if they don't have to. But also, and that's where we'll talk next week about what are the policies should you have in place. That's when you should really review, do you have something in place that will cover a team member in need like this, a medical policy that's not FMLA, but that's given by you as the operator, you as as the franchisee, that covers team members who are not qualified for FMLA or they don't have enough FMLA to cover their condition. So I would suggest you have some sort of policy that is very prescriptive along those lines. Any other questions in there before I move on?
We're good. Thanks, Glennis.
Thanks, Glynis.
Perfect. Okay. So for care of a spouse or child or a parent with a serious health condition, that serious health condition still has to be medically approved. It's still deeming them incapacitated. It has to be medically necessary. And when you get that other form, that second form for care of a family member, it will describe what it is, whether you're going with them to chemo, whether you're going with them to some kind of a doctor's appointment that's way far away, or somebody's having a surgery, a major surgery, that will be laid out in the doctor's information, and you should apply the same rules to that person as you do to the employee. So we're going to skip by extingency just a little bit, but basically this is about, we talked about this a little bit last time, that if you have someone as an active duty and they need additional assistance and you're the main person, this is covering exigency for those people. This is a little bit different. We're going to go past that just a little bit, and we'll come back to that at the end because it's not as common. Okay. So there's two ways that FMLA, you can follow the rules. You can follow it on a calendar year. You can follow it on a fixed year. You can do a rolling year looking back. But whatever way you determine that you want to count entitlement, you have to be consistent and do that with all your team members. The most common is the roll back. And that's just the most common one that most employers use. But you can also use the roll forward, where you're measuring forward from the date that it begins. But the rollback to me seems a little bit easier to measure. I don't know if that's just because I've always done it in all of my HR life. But it just seems a little bit easier to look back on that person because you can clearly see how much they've used and when that bucket will refill. But you can do whichever one of these methods that best fits you as you're determining the eligibility for your store. I would just say pick one and consistently use it with everyone. We talked about spouses that work at the same company and they have to share their leaves. Okay, so intermittent FMLA, again, we talked about this briefly, and this is when you have reduced schedules. So a couple of things. When somebody's on intermittent FMLA, you have to take that into account when you do their evaluation. You cannot evaluate them on 100% if they're on intermittent FMLA. You can only evaluate them based on the time that they're at work that's not FMLA. So just keep that in mind as you're doing any reviews of your team members. And that onus is on you as the operator, HR person, admin. The second thing, and you need to make sure the managers know that too. The second thing is that the team member is responsible for reporting the hours that they're using, or the time that they're using for intermittent FMLA. So even if it's an open schedule, it's just not a free book. They do have to follow the rules as well. I would suggest two things. One, you should have a tracking book for your FMLA for your continuous leaves. So when we're going back here about this rolling backward, rolling forward, you should have a way that you're tracking all the leaves that are continuous. And then you should have a separate area that you're tracking intermittent, because you can keep people honest about their time that they're using. And then that way, if they are, start to slip into an abuse cycle, say, oh, that's not FMLA. For this week, you've exhausted your approved time, so this is going to be a strike against the attendance policy, whatever it is. But you should track these separately for each team member, so you can know where they are with their frequency and their duration. Both of those numbers are important, so there's no abuse. And we can go in that a little bit deeper for anybody who wants to at a later date, but you should have a separate place that you're tracking the intermittent or reduced leaves. That also goes for the ADA as well, because again, remember, that's accommodation, just like PWFA is an accommodation. So you know what you've agreed to and what the accommodation should be as you're making schedules, or as you are looking at people who are coming in late or whatever, that they're using their hours appropriately. Okay. All right. Now, let's say you have somebody who's in a position and it is impeding what they're doing because they're intermittent. This is where you can put them in an alternative role. However, that has to be temporary. It has to have the same benefits, the same pay. Everything must be the same in that alternate role. So you can't demote them. Okay. So let's say I am the shift lead, I get sick, and you put me temporarily at the cash register because of my intermittent FMLA says I can't do something. I got to, do that instead. And you say, oh, well, this will be better for you. You still have to give me the same pay and the same benefits. You cannot drop my pay. You cannot drop my position, even if you're moving me somewhere else temporarily. So keep that in mind. If you're thinking, oh, I can put them in another position, you cannot reduce them at all. And then when their leave is over, you're supposed to return them to their regular role. Okay. Now, if when you write your leave policies, and I don't know what your leave policies say because we haven't gotten to that, that's next week. But when you write your policies out, we talked about this a little bit last time, they should be very prescriptive. FMLA is not paid, but, right, it can run concurrent with something. So you can require, in fact, a lot of employers require their team members to use PTO when they're on FMLA. The reason why they require that is so it's not like I could be out for 12 weeks of FMLA and then I have this bank of PTO, this time off, and then now I have all this vacation coming right behind it. So yes, most employers, this is normal, that you can require them to use their PTO while they're on FMLA, whether it's for themselves or a family member. Now, if they have a STD that's kicking in, I would not do PTO and STD together because that's something different. But you can certainly require that if you're on FMLA only, or for your elimination period for your short-term disability, you must use your PTO while you're on that leave. And that's whether you're caring for yourself or a family member. So you can require them to use that vacation time. So when you get the forms back, we talked about this a little bit, right? You give somebody the forms, right? You say, okay, I calculated you have met the 1 year requirement, you've met the 1,250 hour requirement. You can apply for FMLA, you give them the form, okay? Whether it's for themselves or for their family member, right? You give them the forms, they have 15 days to give it back to you, at least 15 days. Because if somebody's having a baby, they may notify you early. but they won't be able to give you the forms back confirming they actually gave birth until they give birth. So keep that in mind, that 15 days flexible for stuff like that for early birds who are telling you in advance. But they have at least 15 days to turn back that medical certification. Now, I say that loosely because if it's 15 days and you're a stickler and you're like, day 16, I'm denying you, and they give it to you, it can reopen it. So just keep that in mind. But generally speaking, it's 15 days by the law. And we talked about notifying in advance as early as possible. But again, remember, there may be some things that you may not be able to notify for. Certainly pre-planned surgeries, pre-planned procedures, birth, you can require that 30 days in advance notification. But some people may not know. Like if I just, if I have something happens and Jimmy has a stroke, he doesn't know. So as soon as you know, so you may can help him or his family, or the same day that he wakes up, they can apply for leave. In my former life, I used to do this for people. If I knew they were in the hospital, I started their paperwork immediately and said, hey, I know you're in the hospital. You're probably not paying attention to it. So here's your paperwork. I've pre-filled it out for you. Make sure your doctor sends it back if they don't have family. So kind of keep that in mind too. And keep in mind your HIPAA rules if they do have family, because you remember you can't just talk about medical with everybody who's out. Okay. So we talked about that. Okay, so your requirements. This is one of the questions, Cindy, that you asked. Notify. It should be in your handbook. It should be posted. You need to tell people as soon as you're aware that there's a need for FMLA. These are your requirements, right? So it's not just a display. It's not just in the company policy, but when you are made aware that there's a need. And guess what? Remember, they don't have to say FMLA. They don't have to say leave. They don't have to say PWFA. They do have to say I need an accommodation for ADA, but they don't have to say ADA, right? They can just say, I'm not feeling good. I may need some time off. My mom is having migraines. My mom is having a procedure. My husband had a stroke. Those are also them telling you that they have a need and you're required to give them the notification. Okay. Now, when they are on FMLA, you see bullet number 2. You must keep benefits at the same level. So employees have the right to change their benefits when they go out on leave and to change their benefits when they come back from leave. At GIOA, we don't know when your team members are on leave or not. So you have to tell us if they're on leave because we don't have a record of that. But when they go out on leave, they can change their benefits. And when they come back from leave, they can change their benefits again. That's because on FMLA, you cannot terminate their benefits, right? You can have a policy in place that says you must pay me for your benefits while you're out, or I will terminate them. That is allowed. Or you can have a policy that says your benefits remain active, and when you come back, I will collect all the premium out of your first 2 or first 3 checks. That is also allowed. But you cannot just blanketly terminate their benefits because they're on FMLA. So keep that in mind with leave. I'm going to pause because I see Cindy lighting up. Do you have a question, Cindy? In the Q&A?
I do not, Glennis. You are answering them well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. Okay. All right. So when a person comes back from FMLA, from USERA, all right, if you gave them a PWFA accommodation, an ADA accommodation, you must reinstate them in the same or equivalent position. All right. You cannot demote them. You cannot reduce their pay. You cannot reduce their job. They have to go back into the same role. If you do anything to them that is demotional, that is an issue, and that could be a compliance nightmare for you, right? Because you're violating the law. So make sure you put them back into the same position that they were in when they come back from leave. Any of the things that we're talking about today, you return them back to where they were. Okay. What you can't do, we talked about this last time. You cannot hire based on FMLA needs. If you see somebody pregnant, that you cannot do it. I'm sorry. It has no bearings on that, okay? It has no bearings on that. You cannot ask a doctor for each use of intermittent FMLA. Once you get the approval for the intermittent FMLA, that is the approval, the frequency and the duration, and the team member must report that to the HR person. But if you're the manager, you're the supervisor, you cannot ask them to give you a doctor's note for their intermittent FMLA if they're approved for intermittent FMLA. They simply just have to say, I'm taking an FMLA day and turn the time in to count towards their 12 weeks. Okay? You cannot retaliate against them. And retaliation can take a lot of forms, okay? That look, real life example. I had a manager call me. This was prior to my life here at GIOA, by the way, and say, I want my team member investigated for FMLA fraud. I followed them on social media and I saw them dropping it like it's hot at Jimmy's wedding. You cannot follow people on FMLA. You cannot follow them. You cannot do it. You cannot follow them on social media trying to prove them wrong, or in the car, or see them somewhere else. Now, the FMLA that the person had nothing to do with dancing. It did not impede them from dancing at all. So it didn't matter if she was at Jimmy's wedding dropping it like it's hot. We also had people say, well, this person works for Joe and they work for me. They're on FMLA for me, but they can work for Joe. Well, their job with you requires FMLA, but whatever they're doing with Joe, they're just answering the phones. It don't require FMLA. So you cannot stalk the people and interfere with their rights. Once they're approved, they are approved, okay? Don't go be an investigative person. Now, you do have the right to get a second opinion. You do have the right to, do some, like if you always have, I used to have somebody who their mother was always sick at Christmas and they were overseas. But you have to have a replicatable history of abuse, right? So after 3 years, I had a record of abuse. This is not something that you can start playing an Inspector Gadget with. So just be real careful with that if you sense FMLA abuse. I'm going to pause right there. Any questions in the chat?
Glennis, can you explain just briefly what you mean by restore the employee to their job and what equivalent means? Do they need to be given the same job, maybe based in the same tier, same amount of money paid? How does that work?
Yeah, so if I'm a manager and I go out on leave, and when I went out on leave, I was a manager. I made whatever dollars an hour. Let's just call it 10. I don't know. I'm just gonna lowball it there, 10. And I go out on leave. When I come back from leave, I have to be a manager and I have to be making $10 an hour. I can't be demoted to a shift lead. I can't be demoted to a team member. I have to be returned to my equivalent position, as if I never left.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have about 10 minutes left in today's presentation. I was gonna do a couple of quizzes here. While I pull those up, do we have any other questions?
None at the moment.
Okay, let's see if I can do some polls. Oh, hold on. Can y'all still hear me? Am I still here?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, just want to make sure, because I did this last time and now I'm like struggling to get them back up.
Glennis, I do have one
Yes, I do
question
have
that just popped up.
That just popped up.
Okay.
Can an employer
an
ask for a
employer ask
doctor's
for a
note
doctor's
before
note
giving
before
FMLA
giving
rights?
FMLA rights?
Or does the employee have to turn in the doctor's
Turn in the
note with
doctor's
the
note with
FMLA
the FMLA
application?
application.
So a doctor's note will cover any absences 3 days or less. Once it's 3 days or more, is FMLA rights, and then give them the FMLA paperwork.
Thank you,
Does that make
Glennis.
sense what I'm saying? Okay. I cannot get my little quizzes update here. So what I'm going to do instead is show you what the forms look like, and where you can get forms if you don't have any forms right now. Did my screen change, Cindy or Maddie? No,
No,
is it
you've
still
still
there?
got employer requirements up.
Okay, hold on.
But I do have a
Share.
couple more questions before we finish up that just popped up, Glennis.
Yep, go ahead.
This is in referral to reference to the last question. So she wants you to clarify. So there's no note needed from a doctor. Can you reiterate that?
Yes, you do need medical certification from a doctor. Okay. But what you're asking is a doctor's note. So a medical certification is much more detailed than a doctor's note. If you have a team member who was out 1 day, 2 days, that's a doctor's note. If they're out for 3 or more days, that's I'm giving your FMLA rights. Like they're out for 5 days. Did you need FMLA? And then they would apply for a leave. Now you can certainly say if they come back in 5 days, maybe not make them go through that full process and determine what you're going to do. But remember, if your attendance policy slaps them on the wrist and it's like a third strike, right? Then you need to think about making sure you're giving their FMLA rights. You should always give them their FMLA rights for absences greater 3 days and greater, because after 3 days it qualifies for FMLA and it protects their job. So am I telling you can't get a doctor's note? No. But are you not giving them their rights if you make them give you a doctor's note for over 3 days? Correct, because you should be giving them the FMLA rights and allow them to determine if they're going to apply for leave or not. Now, if that's their first time being laid and out for 5 days and there's no punitive action, that's according to your leave policy. But, most places, 3 days, no call, no show is a termination. So you definitely want to give them their rights. Now, what I'm going to show you in that regard is what it looks like, to your point about doctor's information. So if you do not have your own version of what a qualified FMLA form will look like, you can get that from a couple places. You can get it from Mineral. You can also get it from the Department of Labor as well. There are versions out there of both. The reason why I went to Department of Labor is because they have it in Spanish as well. And in Mineral, I believe they have the employee version, but they don't have the spouse or family member version. So if you go out to the DOL website, I'm in DOL.gov, Family Medical Leave Act, and forms, you will have these forms. So what you were talking about, hold on, I'm gonna open this for you. I think I'm gonna open this for you. Yep. And hold on. Sorry, y'all. I need to shrink my screen. It's being weird. Okay, it's not gonna let me shrink it. So let me just reshare. So this particular form is one from the U.S. Department of Labor. You don't have to use this version. Again, there's versions in Mineral. You can make your own as long as you get the information. That's what's most important. But under this form, it gives you the definition. It talks about the job functions. And then there's a portion where there's medical information. So this is what the doctor will fill out, right? The medical information. So you'll fill out that first part for the team member and you'll give it to them. They take it to their doctor, and then the doctor will fill out this information. And I'm not sure if it's big enough. I don't know if it's big enough on the screen, but as you can see, it says it gives the date of the condition to start. So the doctor will tell you the date that the person needs to be out. They'll tell you how long it will last. So how long the person will be out. Is it 228? Do they need to be re-seen on March 1st for reevaluation? They'll tell you that. It'll tell them if it's inpatient care, if it's not inpatient care, if it's pregnancy, they have to check off what applies, right? So the patient is expected to be admitted on these dates. So I'm having a surgery. I'm going to be inpatient. It's going to say the dates that I'm admitted. And these dates should kind of be jiving with what they put on as the start and the end date of your leave. It should somewhere be in between. Okay. If they had outpatient surgery, so like, let's say that a rotator cuff or some kind of, let's say 5 days, I had pneumonia and I was out for 5 days with pneumonia. So it would tell you if the patient has already been in there, past tense. I've been out for 5 days in this case, Cindy, and I need a doctor's note, right? This would cover that, or I'm going to be because I'm having a surgery. And it'll also tell you if they're pregnant, if it's chronic, if it's long-term, and if it requires multiple treatments, right? Or it could be a combination of both. I could be having breast reduction surgery and I need to get chemo. So it will say I'm going to be inpatient for surgery on these days, and then I have a chronic condition, and then I'm going to need some long-term treatment for my cancer. So that is why the doctor fills all this out. It's very detailed, right? Very detailed. And then the doctor's going to come over here and tell you, this is how much leave I think they're going to need for all this treatment that I have to give them. And this is the information that you get back within 15 days. So when you see this, you can say, okay, this qualifies in the FMLA. I'm going to approve it for this lump sum of time. And you tell the team member, Kathy, you have been approved for FMLA from February 20th until May 31st. Please give us a return to work before you report back to work on June 1st. Be clear from your doctor. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? And also you'll see the healthcare provider signs it. See, they sign it right back here. If it's not signed, don't take it. You can request this. You can request a team member to give this to you in English if it comes from a place where you can understand it, that they have to pay to get it translated. I've had to do that a couple times for care of a family member overseas or wherever. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay. And it looks almost the same for care of someone else. But that is what the medical is, and that is why everybody should not have it, because it's very detailed. Okay. Are there
Janice,
any
I have
other
a couple more questions.
Yes.
If the person's role is vital to the business operation and they take intermittent FMLA, can they be moved to an alternative role with the same pay and benefits?
Yes, as long as their pay and benefits are not reduced, and as long as when their leave is over, you return them to their regular role.
And if the team member does not return within 12 weeks, is it safe to terminate them? Can you give us any advice here?
Very good question. Love this question. So first, you need to check to make sure you know when their bucket for FMLA is going to refill before you terminate them. Because if it refills before termination, I would tell you no. Now, all that being said, technically, yes, you can. You should send them information though, so you have for your records, Glennis, we know your leave is ending. You should be returning to work on this day. Please bring the clearance before you come. And if they don't come, send a note and then, you can follow through. But yes, if they fail to return from leave, as long as their bucket has not refilled, then you can terminate them. It only protects them for that 12 weeks of time.
Thank you, Glennis.
Thank you, Glennis.
Are there any other questions?
Glennis, there's
Okay.
no questions in the chat, but if I could just point one thing real quick. Just a reminder for everyone that Mineral is a great resource for you guys. And you talked about the importance of tracking intermittent FMLA. They actually have an FMLA spreadsheet tool that's created that you can use as an asset. So I would encourage you guys to check out that tool.
And we can send a link out to that tool to the operators admins post call. Oh, yes. We got a note from someone who said they didn't have access to Mineral. If you are an admin and you need access to Mineral, your operator can make sure he signed you up properly as an admin, and then we can give you access to Mineral. Good call out, Maddie. Okay. So, it's 4:01. I want to be cognizant of our time and make sure I turn you all loose. Next week, we're going to talk about policies that you should have in place, what should be in those policies, what it looks like, and that way that you know that you're covered as far as policies go. So that will be, do you need a personal leave policy? Do you need a leave for medical care of somebody policy that works concurrent with FMLA or after FMLA has exhausted? So please join us for that session. If you have any questions about leave in general, just email those to us and we're happy to add those to our FAQ that we have created for this particular training. And this recording will be placed out on our YouTube channel this evening. Thank you all for joining the call. We really appreciate your time. Oh, there's a question in Q&A. Oops, I didn't see that.
Hey,
Did we answer
Glennis,
that?
one more question. Stephanie's asking, she said, hypothetically speaking, if we have an employee that has been calling out because of pains, he says he went to the doctor and needs surgery with a 4-week recovery period. I can give him FMLA rights, and this document would cover everything necessary and as a doctor's proof. If we have suspicion that this is false and he cannot complete this form, then we can revert to the normal attendance expectation and consequences, correct?
Yes, as long as you've given him his rights, and then that 15-day window to turn back his documentation, you certainly can. You want to make sure you've done what you're supposed to do though first before you do any of those attendance things, and then make sure you outline that. If you don't have a current leave policy, I would lean on the FMLA rules while you write your leave policy, but please give him his rights. Let him know he needs to apply for FMLA leave, and that and then when he applies, say, hey, if he qualifies, you have 15 days to turn back in his medical certification. Now that will retro cover his leave for the time he's been out, but at least it puts him into a stance of you all are actually monitoring what he's doing versus just letting him be out. So yes, please give him rights, evaluate him to see if he qualifies, let him apply for leave and get the paperwork. Start that process. Any other questions? Oh, I see another one.
I think we're all good, Glennis.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, I will stop the recording. Thank you all for attending. See you next Friday.